Today I talk about piping, putting piping into your bindings for your finished quilts. And let me show you what that does for your quilts. This is regular piping. And look what it does for the edges. It really makes them stand out. And this is just, I don't know if you put it up here really close. Where's that camera? Right here. See how, well, I can't see it now. See how close? It's just little tiny piping that you put in there. And it really adds a zing of color to your quilts and makes them pop and really makes them look awesome. Okay, so there's that one. And this one I've done, which is, remember when we did sergers? This is what the binding looks like when you put in piping and you've made your own piping out of the 3-thread rolled edge. This is the rolled hem that's done on the serger. Doesn't that really look nice? It really makes, no one else is going to have quilts like this. This is fabulous. Speaking of, I think you guys had talked about these before. That those of you taking my stack and whack class, these are the leftovers. This was I think the leftovers, and I can't remember whose it was. But look at the leftover blocks that we had. I just took the little leftover wedges, and this is all the same fabric. Isn't that neat? I love this. And so not 1 inch of that fabric went to waste. What didn't go into the quilt is a stack and whack. I used it, put them together with other pieces to make blocks for this random quilt. It's easy to make piping. We were always taught to make piping with a zipper foot, but the problem with a zipper foot is when you make the binding, it can twist on you because the top will go, and then you end up with this ripply looking stuff. I don't have one in there, but you can imagine. It always ripples and it looks terrible. So I don't use that foot to make my piping. Different feet you can use to make the binding or make your own piping. Now this one right here is the purl and piping foot. And that's for big piping. That's at least that 1/4 inch, even a little bit bigger, because it's got that great big, let's focus in on that. That's too big. It's not going to do that mini piping. Another one you can use is the pintock foot. And this is for teeny tiny binding. And at first, this is what we used to have to use. We had no choice. It was this or the zipper foot. And I was never happy with what the zipper foot did. So then they have this new one out, which is called a mini piping foot. See, the channel is smaller. It still has a channel underneath, but it's about 1/8 of an inch thick. So this is good when you're using 1/8 inch piping or even 1/16 inch piping. First of all, if you want the wave one, the one with the wave, all I have done here is I've set, it actually goes this way, I have set the stitch up for a 3-thread rolled wave stitch with the stitch, I think I just used an M for the stitch width. And I have used woolly nylon in both the upper and the lower looper, and I have chose to use regular thread in my needle. That's the straight ones. And then I just make yards and yards of this stuff. And that's what I did on that black and white quilt. Black, white, and red quilt. And that's all I did for the binding. And the smaller the stitch length you use, the closer these color changes are going to be. If you don't have a wave on your serger and you have the ability to do a rolled edge, you can do the same thing. Just use variegated thread in your upper looper, especially in your upper looper, so that it actually matches, that's got maybe a 12-inch color separation, and you'll get a similar effect. Not quite, but it'll be similar. And I do yards and yards. You only need like a 1/2 inch strip or an inch strip of a whole bunch of different colors. And I usually do it, usually will stitch it on fabric that matches the background of the border that I'm going to use for the quilt. Okay. Other things you can use to stuff this really tiny piping. This is actually DMC pearl cotton. I don't like this too much. It's very, very thin. It's very, very soft. And when you're done, where's the one I did here? It's very, very flat. I wasn't impressed, okay? But in the old days, we would put 2 or 3 layers of this stuff in there to make it stuffed before we had anything else. Then the other thing I like to use, or did use before, was cordonette. This is the stuff that, and it's getting hard to find it. You can only find it in black and white, and I think you can still get it on Home Sew or a couple of the notions. This one is made by Metler, and it's called KNOPFLOC GIMPE. It's gimp cord is what it's called. What it's used for is to, what do you call it, when you have the raised buttonholes, the corded buttonholes, that's what it's for. And it comes in black and white, but who's going to see it? It's going to be on the inside, so this is a good one too. This one will give you some nice piping. Here's one I did. Okay, and it has a nice hand to it. It's raised enough that you can feel through it, and so it's a little, it's hard, it's not really thick, but it has a very nice soft hand to it. So this is actually good as if you're going to do mini piping in garments, because it is soft and it bends easily. What I like best for quilts, and I got this from an upholstery shop 100 million years ago, or my mother did, and this is for Venetian blinds. It's just upholstery cording, and it's for window treatments, and I have a gigantic thing of it, but I do like it because it really raises. See, it's nice and filled. You can really feel it through here. I know it's black and it's hard to see, and it has a little bit of stiffness to it, but I like it because it is the easiest to use. You can really feel the ridge of where that cording stuffing is. So to make the cording, I already have one done. Let me get a piece. You just need 1 inch of fabric. Okay, I'm going to set up my machine for a straight stitch. What I like to use is wash away thread. Here's a big spool of it. It's Vanish Extra by Superior Threads, and they make Vanish, and there's Vanish Extra. You want the Vanish Extra. The regular Vanish steams away and breaks really easily. The Vanish Extra is a little bit of a thicker thread, and it doesn't break as easily. And you can put it in just your bobbin, or you can put it in both bobbin and needle, which is what I've done. Okay, so I'm going to place, let me get this cording so I can grab it out the back. And I'm going to place this in that mini piping, and if you can see, the edge of the piping, or the edge of the fabric, is right here on this inside left side of that opening there. Okay, and then I'm going to move my needle over, and this uses normally a center needle position, so I'm going to move that needle to 5.0. In other words, I want that stitch to be just a little bit to the left, or excuse me, to the right of the cording. And I'm just, and you can always test it, because it shouldn't be catching the cording. It should be just missing it. I should be able to move this cording after it's sewn. I don't want to stitch the cording to the fabric. So you would take your finger and move in, and you're going to keep this left edge of the fabric along the left edge of that opening. Getting my fingers, okay? I'm going to go slow because you're only going to go about 4 or 5 inches, and you're going to push that cording to the left edge and just sew. Why I like to use this thread is because I can make this piping, and if you've ever put piping in pillows or anything else, you make the piping, and then when you go to sew it in, you're going to see a line if you don't get it just perfectly, and you know, I don't want to see a stitching line. I'm perfectly happy with my stitching line. I just don't want to see it. So what you do is, if you happen to see it, spritz it with some water and steam it, and that thread goes away, and therefore you have everything nice and neat. And if you notice, I should be able to still move my cord, and I am. A little too fast. Okay. And see, that cording is going to ride in that channel, so once it's caught in there, you don't have to really worry too much about it. It's going to catch. And see, even over here where I didn't get it quite straight. Here, can you see that better? Can you see this? I don't know if you can see the stitching. See the white stitching right there? It's not quite straight. I don't care. It's good enough. You're not going to see that stitching afterwards. Okay, then you're going to trim your piece. You want to trim that piping back to a 1/4 inch if you're going to use a 1/4 inch seam, or 1/2 inch, or whatever you use. And this is what I like to trim it with. There's 2 tools out on the market. This one is made by Susan Cleveland, and it's called the Groovin' Piping Trimming Tool. This is a really nice tool. It's got a groove here for the piping to sit, and on this side it gives you a 1/4 inch seam. On this side it gives you a 1/2 inch seam. So here's this piece. I would just, now this one is fine. You're going to put the groove right here. You'll know it's good because you should be able to move this up and down. So you would say start to trim it. And here is my trimmer. Then you scoot it down, and you keep scooting it down till you have it all trimmed. Okay? Easy to do. This one is nice because it's longer, and that I do like about it, but you are restricted to the 1/16 inch, I think, or even 1/8 is the most it can go. This one is put out by Simplicity, and it's called the Piping Wizard, and other people make it too. And this actually has 4 settings. You have here a bit, you can see over here that you have, this is for 1/4 inch piping with a 1/4 inch seam. This side is 1/4 inch piping with a 1/2 inch seam. Then on this side you turn it over, and then you have 1/8 inch piping with a 1/2 inch seam. Right next to it is with a 60. This is a 1/4 inch seam. This hole is a 1/2 inch. Then you've got over here 1/16 inch piping, which is what I'm using now, with either a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch. And see how the sides look? This one is fine to use. The only problem I have with it is that it's short. And it works the same way. See how it goes up and down? It should move easily. And you would trim, but you're going to have to do a lot of trimming. You're going to have to do a lot of moving. It doesn't work very well on this one because this one is 1/8 of an inch. So therefore, when I try to use this one, it doesn't want to move. I can move the ruler, but I'm stretching the fabric. So which means I'm not getting a 1/4 inch seam. So for this one, I actually prefer this one and use it on the 1/8. And then you see I would have to, and you can't, you've got to have a bigger blade. You've got to use a 60mm blade because this is too thick to be used. I guess I could use it at an angle. No, I can't. I'd probably draw it, or use that 60mm blade, and I don't have a 60mm rotary cutter up here. Wonder if, nah, it won't. Let me see if this one works. It doesn't like that one. Let's see if it likes this one. I think it's not going to like it either. See, and that's the drawback to this Simplicity one. Well, it'll work with this one. This blade's dull. you get the idea. There, and then it's trimmed to 1/4 of an inch. Although that's not quite a quarter. To me, that's an awfully big 1/4 of an inch. This one is truer. Okay, now say we want to put it on our quilt. Okay, so I have this piece. What I do first is I'm going to square the quilt, but I'm going to square it with a Sharpie marker or a pencil or something. Don't want to use the friction pens because you're going to be pressing. You don't want this to go away. So let me heat up this iron because we're going to need it. And my trusty glue. Yay, I love glue. Okay. So what you do is, here's one I have already done and it's already trimmed. So I'm going to take this. This is actually going to be my cutting line. So I'm going to put this on the inside of this cutting line. Okay. Move these things that I could melt out of the way. And I'm just going to place this right here, right at the edge, because that's where I'm going to cut and that's where I'm going to use as my sewing line. So, and I just heat set it into place. You could pin it. I'm not pinning. That's why God gave us glue. It's wonderful stuff. Okay, it's going to flatten that cord a little bit, but that's okay. And usually what I like to do is I'm going to cut here. And I want to dig out this cording a little bit. I usually will wait till this is sewn. But see, I'm going to pull that cording out a little bit. Pull it back. Why I'm doing that is because I'm going to retract it to about right there. And the reason I do is when I go to sew this way, I don't want the foot to get caught on the cording. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to take this, pull it out a little bit, and cut it. Alrighty, then I'm going to sew it. I'm only going to do one side at a time. Okay, now this time, if I feel confident, I'll put the regular thread on here. But no, I'm not gonna. Okay, so I'm going to come back over here to the machine and I'm going to use the same settings because I already know that this is my 1/4 inch because I'm going to trim it after I'm done putting the piping on. Or even after I put the binding on, it doesn't matter. And I'm just going to sew across. I'm not going to worry about it shifting now because I'm going to sew. And I can make my stitch length a little longer if I like. And it will go over the exact same spot. The convenience of not worrying about whether your stitching is just right is worth dealing with the breaking. Scoot it back. Where did my thread break? Problem is it came out of this thing, and that's why it was jamming. I was blaming the poor thread. Oh, see, no problems now. And see, I'm just leaving that in the same spot. And then just sew off. Then I'm going to repeat the process on the other side. So we go over here again. We glue the next side down. I'm only going to do 2 sides. Here we go. So I'm going to glue down this side. Wrong way. This is on just to the inside. probably going to pull this part out first. Okay? That just keeps it from catching. Okay, and then you just lay this. You can crisscross it right on the edge. You want to make sure you get all the way to the edge because you can trim that later. And see, I'm not. Now I'm ready to put the binding on. Okay, and then I'm going to cut it, pull out that cording a little bit from here. Trim it away and make that piece flat on the end, and then heat set that down. And then you just sew over. You're going to do that on all 4 sides. Then when you're ready to put your binding on, this is not the binding I'm going to use on it. I haven't found the green that I like. And you just put your binding on normally, where you're going to set your binding, and you can feel where. Now, if you're not comfortable doing it this way, you can put your binding on backwards. And by that I mean, I'm now going to go to this inside. Okay, I'm going to heat set this down, just putting it with the edge. This is binding but backwards. Okay, and then you're going to do the same thing. You're going to fold this to the outside, right along the edge. And then heat set it down. Okay, because that's where you're going to stop stitching. However, you can tell where you're going to stop stitch. I should have used black thread in the bottom, and I didn't. You know what? I need to sew that down, and this time I'm going to change the color of thread because you're not going to see it. Okay, I'm going to put red thread in the bobbin. I'm going to stitch both of them again so that we can see them. I'll do this. I'll do a longer stitch length just so it takes less time. And then I'll sew along this end. That went off a little bit. That's okay. I'll get it. Okay, now let's go back to what we were talking about. Now we can see the stitching, which is what I wanted to do. Because normally we go this around the quilt clockwise. We're going to go counterclockwise with this method. Okay, there we go. Okay, I can still see it, sorry. Okay. Turn that like normal. I'm just putting a crease in it for now. And now that's basted down, and then we are going to go to the machine. And I'm going to straighten this binding out like this. Now we'll go to the machine. Now I've got regular thread in both the needle and in the bobbin. I'm still going to use that piping foot. Okay, start in the middle, leave a tail. And actually my piping is right there. Okay, so this time I'm going to use the right edge of the foot as a guide. And because that is exactly where I'm stitching. Right over the line or just to the pressure is not right on this machine today. Time to come visit Justin. And I'm going to stop right there. I do not like to backspace because I may get it wrong, so I'm going to raise my needle. I'm going to scooch it back a little bit, like about a stitch. Then I'll hit my reverse button. Okay? Because now I've caught it. The problem with the reverse button is sometimes they move ahead and you don't want them to, so if you scoot it back a couple stitches, then hit the reverse button, even if it moves forward, it's not going to affect your seam. Okay, then we go back to the ironing board. Okay, you press that open like this. Bring it back on itself, exactly on this edge right here. I'm going to give it a press. Then I'm going to baste it down. Okay. And the glue, in case you hadn't noticed, I'm using a Roxanne dispenser from old Roxanne glue, which will work fine, but it was long empty, but I love that dispenser, so I'm using it with regular Elmer's washable school glue. And then I just press it into place to the other side. Okay, take it to the back, turn it over again, back to the machine, and you're going to know where you're going to start stitching. I'm going to put the needle right in the corner, stitch 2 stitches, one more, raise the needle, scoot back, put it back in that corner, and then sew right over the red line, which is the line from the front. Yep, this machine needs some work. I'm having to pull it through. Feed dogs are not working. Like there's no pressure. Okay, I don't have an end point because I didn't cross it, so I'll just leave it there. Okay? And now I would trim it. And see, even if I have some white showing, I have a choice. I can go back and sew that a little closer if I wanted to, which I probably would. I don't know, and trim the threads. Look at how pretty that looks. See? And you're going to now be the time that you're going to trim. Just hold that back. Well, I'm just cutting it. I'll probably do this with a rotary cutter, but not right now. So I'm just going to cut it for now so you can see what it would look like. Almost knocked something else over. Okay, so now when I go to turn it, I usually would press it open and then press this back. I'll only put a couple pins. Put them on the back so you get an idea what it's going to look like. you'll see the corner. And then you do it the same way. It's just mirror image backwards. But look, isn't that awesome? That just looks awesome. It gives me, now these little white bits, just put water on them and steam, they'll be gone. You'll only see the black and it'll only look perfect. Isn't that cool? Love it. The foot that I stitched with was the mini piping foot. They make them left and right. I like the center one. I've never seen where you needed to have left or right. Center works fine because we can move our needles. If we couldn't move our needles, that's an issue. If you think of questions afterwards, feel free to email me.